Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Naomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. Today, I wanted to talk to you in this episode about workplace psychological safety and what does that mean for leaders and how do we show up in a space that allows us to provide an environment that's psychologically safe for our team members. And the words thrown around, the concepts thrown around quite a bit, and we can tend to think, oh yeah, we're doing a good job because we feel good, without actually taking that time to check in with our team or have a look at what's happening around us. So a few telltale signs that your workplace psychological safety isn't as good as it could be would be a lot of complaining about leadership, about decision making, about being left out, not being heard. All right, so that feedback that might be coming in, not directly to you, but amongst the team. And if the team is talking amongst themselves and not coming to you, then that's a really good sign that there's an issue with the workplace psychological safety within that work environment. Another thing that may be a bit of a hint that there's something you could work on is if there are some people that are performing well and some people that are not. And that is then causing conflict within your team, or it's impacting the mental engagement and the presenteeism by some people within the group. That is another thing that causes pressure in that psychological space. So, there's a list that in Western Australia, anyway, DEMIRS has on their website, government department has a list of workplace psychological and psychosocial hazards, which you can look into. But in summary, it kind of means, are you leading effectively? Do you have good job role setups for your team? Have you set the expectations for them? Do they know how they need to perform? Are you providing adequate resources? I mean, one of the issues that we're experiencing, at least in Western Australia, and I assume in other parts of the world as well, is that it's really difficult to find staff, especially for some of these specialist roles. And that means that the staff that are there have increased job demands. So what are the controls you can put in place for that, right? You can't just hire new people. Well, there's a lot of them if you sit down and brainstorm with your team, and that creates a space that's psychologically safe when you can brainstorm and get some really good ideas from your team members. And, one of the ones that just first comes to mind to me from a session I was delivering today was, creating a space where they have adequate resources. You go to pick up that stapler and it doesn't staple correctly, and it's a really quick fix, but no one's actually done anything about it. So you already got these job demands and these pressures in your role, yet the tools that you're trying to use aren't serving their purpose. That increases frustration, right? That increases the pain that we're feeling. And then we get frustrated, annoyed, and sometimes we have the inability to control the emotions, right, that come through from that space. So have a look around at the job design, right, and have a look at the resources that people have and make sure they're adequate. Some people may be working with one screen when two screens may make it easier for them. So these are little things that can be fixed. So as leaders, it's checking in with the team. What can we do to make things easier for you? And they're going to say more people, but if we can't have more people, let's think outside the square. An example for being resourceful that I use in some of my sessions is, thinking of a scenario. You've got this castle in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a moat that you can't get to. The moat's full of sharks and crocodiles and piranhas. And then outside the moat, there is this, high voltage electric fence that's like 20 meters high. And you can't just touch it, you can't cut it, you can't get through it. And then you think, in the master bedroom of this beautiful big castle, there's a $10 note. And then try and think up ways to get in there. Right now, most people are going to go $10. Yeah, I think I'll just leave it there. I'm not going to waste my time, resources, energy of trying to get in for $10. Yet if we change that scenario to it being something you love, something you're really connected to, maybe it's family members, or maybe it's pets, or maybe it's something that you're really passionate about that's sitting on that bed that you need to get to, then the ideas go next level. Right. And so sometimes it's not about having the resources, it's about being resourceful. Now, for those of you who didn't have their brain go, because you're really not in that scenario, right? There's not really a family member or a loved one or something you love stuck in a castle. But some of the examples or some of the suggestions I've had have been amazing. There's hot air balloons and helicopters and all these sorts of things that could get you in there that you're not going to think of when you're in that limited mindset. And that's what happens in a workplace that's not psychologically safe. But it has a limited amount of thinking capacity, idea creation, and you could be missing some real gold within your team. Another thing that leads me to finding workplaces aren't really psychologically safe is the fact that conversations aren't being had that need to be had. Right. So employees aren't performing the way that they need to, or they're not being set up for success, and they're not being told the things that they should be doing or the things that they're not doing well. And that then starts creating and fostering a really unhealthy workplace culture. And so as leaders, sometimes we're not trained in how to do that properly, or we leave it to the point of frustration and we come in from an angle that's not conducive to workplace psychological safety, right? We're annoyed, we're driven by emotion, we could be swearing at the person, and not communicating clearly. But when we come in and reframe that into a different space, then we can show up in a different space. And there's a range of different ways that we can communicate, that we can really get our message across without having to be confrontational, without having to go in and trigger someone else to get the responses we need. And we can go into these spaces, and there's a lot of them I talk about in the ripple effect, how we can actually communicate in a way that gets the best of the other person. And one of the key elements of that is understanding that other person. Now, by understanding that other person, I don't mean go and be BFFs with them and drink with them every night and create a familiar relationship with them. I mean, stand up and have a healthy relationship as a leader to them, have those boundaries so that when you show up to have these conversations, they have that element of respect for you. But what I'm also meaning is really get to know them on why they get triggered from particular things, how they may respond differently. Because as humans, we sometimes are in this space of we don't know what we don't know. And we can sometimes judge other people for their behaviors because they're not like ours. So they seem irrational, or they seem like something we can't understand. And then we put labels on these people, and we're not able to come in from a place of really strong empathy. So again, my program goes really deep into that sort of thing, but there's lots of ways you can also understand different people. There's lots of courses you can do, lots of research that you can read, and there's different models that are set up that can give you an understanding of your team. Now, you can go in and do DISC profiles and Myers-Briggs type testing and all of that, but also when you do that, add in another element. Add in, what I do is I add in some elements of why some people behave the way they do from a subconscious perspective, something they don't even realize, so that when they behave in that way, we can actually understand and go, oh, they're not actually feeling safe right now, or what I said has triggered them. So I mustn't be coming across in the right way to be able to communicate clearly. Because once someone's triggered and emotion comes in, the rationality goes out the window. So that's the last thing we want to do. And another key thing you can do for your team is setting them up with some really good expectations. Right. I've been in workplaces before, and even like when I've started in a lot of my jobs over my whole career, you're given a company induction. If you're lucky, you're given a job description, you buddied up with someone, you take your notepad and your pen, and off you go. And the first time you hear about something you haven't done right is when you're in a performance review or your 6-month probation review or you're being performance managed, right? There's not clear expectations that we set. And setting KPIs is really important. It's not just to be able to set up success for the business, productivity, making sure we're hitting targets, all of that. It's also to create a safe space for people so they know where they're operating within and they know what's expected of them. And another key element on why we would do this is because people that pick up bad habits, once they've done it once, twice, 3 times, 20 times, depending how often you have these conversations, right? That then becomes their baseline. That becomes what they do as in their habitual space. So when we do eventually go to have that conversation with them, they're thinking, what's wrong with them? I've been doing that for ages. And subconsciously, they end up thinking we're the problem, right? And that we're being judgy or we expect too much or we're not being reasonable with our conversations with them. But if you set up these expectations from the start, they know exactly where they need to be. They know what the boundaries are. They know what's expected of them. And then they can work towards performing to that. And it also makes it easier if you have to have those conversations, right? So we've got role clarity, setting that up really well, addressing job demands, making sure that we've got the resources there. If we're not able to give the human resources, then make sure all of their other resources are up to date, helpful. Try and look at maybe some technologies you can bring in. There's a whole range of stuff you can do there. But the key element of a workspace that's psychologically safe comes down to the leadership. And it comes down to what we're modeling and how we're behaving as leaders within that space. Have we got the back of our people? If they make a mistake, are we throwing them under a bus or are we taking the fall for that and showing them that it doesn't matter what happens, that someone's going to be there for them? If they're in a space where they're feeling under pressure, do we go to support them or do we just let them suffer? Right? Are we giving them space when they come into the workplace to be able to be humans? This whole leave your personal life at the door or leave it at the gate isn't realistic. Maybe we've gone into that space in the past and traditionally thought that that's possible, but we're humans, not robots. And even if we try our hardest, it's not going to work. It's affecting our cognition. So, do we provide them with resources as well that can help with their well-being, physical well-being, mental well-being, spiritual well-being? How can we set up and be a leader that can support all of those areas? So, as well as doing that, we need to be able to be trustworthy and show up in that space where if we say we're going to do something, we do it and we have that strong integrity. Because as soon as one of the employees doesn't trust you, then you're going to lose them. They're not going to come forward with their ideas. They're not going to be able to perform as high. They're going to have resentment. They're going to have all of this stuff going through their head in the stories they create about the workplace and also about their relationship with you. And they're the people that are probably looking for another job too, right? And we want to retain people as much as we can. So, as leaders, we need to have that high level of emotional intelligence so that when we're faced with a situation, we're not just blowing up, right? We're coming in from a space where we're being able to respond rather than react. And there's only 3 true things that we have control over in our life. And I left a pause there for you to try and think what they might be. It's not the weather, it's not the seasons, It's not our employees' behavior. We think that we can control other people, but we don't. All we can do is influence them and hope that they make the right decisions. Right? The three things that we have control over as humans is the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we act. That's it. Completely it. And in managing our emotions, some people might not have that realization that they have control over their emotional space and how they present, yet we do it all the time.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Naomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Naomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgroconsulting.com.au.
One of the common things that I think is common amongst all people is we've all been in that space at least once where something's really rivaled us up, right? And got us in a space of frustration or anger. And we've been frustrated, we've been angry, whether it's at workplaces, whether it's in the home, whether it's with something going wrong. Something's riled us up, and maybe the phone rings and we pick up the phone and go, hello, right? And we switch like that. But the magic doesn't stop there, right? As soon as that phone call's finished or that conversation's finished or someone that's rocked up at our door has left that space, it's kind of like in our brain, we go, right, where was I? And we go back into that space, right? And we've all done this. So we've all displayed and proven to ourselves that we have the ability to control our emotions. Now, sometimes it's easier said than done, but with everything, it's like Tony Robbins says, repetition is the mother of all skill. It's just practicing and trying again. You don't go to the gym once and become, super fit, right? You go to the gym and you consistently show up and you consistently put in the work, and that's how you become fit. And the same happens for leadership. People think I've been promoted, I'm a leader, or I'm a manager, or I own a business, or I do this, and they think automatically they have this golden ticket to leadership. And I'm telling you, that's not how it is. Leadership is a continual journey. It's a continual space. And if we're looking at our employees and wanting them to grow into spaces and start developing themselves and taking on more responsibility and being in a space where they're becoming more productive, then we've got to show them how that's done. We need to be listening to podcasts like this one, or listening to audiobooks, attending conferences, doing training, maybe even signing up for the Ripple Effect if that's what you choose to do, right? Going in and taking a space of continual learning. And if you're not in the space where you want to spend money or you can spend money at the moment, there's a lot of free resources out there as well that you can tap into. So there's no real excuse why we shouldn't be on this continuous learning journey. And I find even the best leaders that I've had or that I see, if they're not continuously spending time on learning themselves and developing themselves, they're actually not showing up to their full potential. They may be great in that space, they may be good in that space, but they could be exceptional if they take those steps and if they choose to want to continue to learn and grow. And learning about people is really important. How they tick, how they work, how do I get the most out of them? How do I make someone feel significant? So when I come to them with something that's challenging, they're not going to see it as a threat and get triggered. Right? How do I show up and come into this space where I'm seen as a leader and not just as their friend, and they respect what I have to say and they trust what I'm trying to get them to do and trust where I'm standing, right? There's so many different aspects to it, and probably the key ones that I've thought of and put together, that's what forms the program. And for me, it's understanding workplace psychological safety and what those hazards are, so that we can, once we're aware of them, like I said, you don't know what you don't know, but once we're aware of those psychosocial hazards, then we can put the right controls in place. The next step is getting to know people, understand people on a deeper level. Why do they think like that? Why do they behave like that? Why do they respond emotionally like that? What's driving it? So that I can come from a place where I'm not triggering that within them as a leader. And sometimes then they behave differently in groups. Why are they that particular way when they're working by themselves, but I'm seeing these behaviors showcased when they're in the group? There's a whole lot of psychological science behind what happens when we're in groups and how we respond and how we show up. So it's important to learn about that as well. And then moving into the whole mindset space. I said the three things, if you remember, the only three things that we can control are our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. So we're already understanding behaviors a little bit more. And while we're learning about other people, we get to learn about ourselves too, right? But it's also understanding mindset. Where does a growth mindset come from? What is it? How does it show up? And how can I tap into that? And also then the emotions. What's emotional intelligence? How does that work? How can I be more aware of what's going on so I can continuously improve when I show up in these situations that challenge me or that tend to trigger some of these emotional responses within me? Also looking at doing that performance management, right? And it doesn't have to be just for low performers. We still need to think about our high performers when we're doing performance management because they still want guidance. They still have goals and aspirations that they want to work towards, right? And that's how we can help shift them there. And I was speaking with a client the other day who had an employee come in and say, I want to, increase my salary. I want to start earning more money. What do I need to do? I thought that was perfect. One, showed a space that's psychologically safe. And two, it then gave them an ability to sit down and say, right, well, if you want to step up to this next level, here's the things that you need to do. And here's the objectives you need to meet. You need to increase this level of experience in this area. You need to have some training in that space and outline them to give people some direction on where they can go. It just got triggered by my watch. So, then actually setting up those boundaries and expectations is super important as well. So going through how to set up, effective KPIs and how to set up something that's going to be understandable from someone and give them the ability to work autonomously, right? Without having to come and ask you every 5 seconds what they need to do or where they need to be. And then once you've got that all down, then it's having those conversations, right? How do we have conversations with people that can be challenging, but take the challenge out of it? How do we continually be in a space where something goes wrong and we just grab the person and have the conversation rather than making excuses of, I'll wait till the end of the day. I'm a bit too busy. It's not the right time for them. I'll do it tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes though, right? Or by the time you go to do it, you go, oh, it's too late. I'll let it go. And it reinforces that their behavior is okay. Right. So it's showing up for them, right, as leaders and doing it in an effective way. It's not going, oh, I don't mind having these conversations, but just going in, barking orders and walking away. It's about going in and effectively having a really great communication space where the conversation is being driven by both parties and both walk out with clear direction on where to go from here. Everyone has different perceptions of different situations, and you can have two people in exactly the same situation. Say it's a car accident, right? Two people in a car accident that can walk away and have completely different perceptions of what's happened in that space. That's the beauty of humans. And so that goes back and reaffirms that need to get to know people and being able to understand how to connect with them and clarify that they do understand what's coming through and they do understand where you're coming from. And then once you're in that space where you've gone through and looked at that journey and really started to absorb all of that information, and then you start taking steps to make changes in the way that you show up, the way that you performance manage, the way that you communicate, the way that you have an understanding of the team members around you, and the way that you strengthen those connections. Well, then it's time to kind of continue that looking at self and going, well, now I've realized that when I do that, I'm not getting the great results. And that's what I want to change. And so that's stepping into that space of changing those habits, changing your identity of self. And what you think of yourself as a leader today will be different of what you think of yourself as a leader in the future. And that's okay. When we're first born, we don't walk, we don't talk, we pretty much are just really super demanding. And that changes, right? So we start to learn how to do all of these new tasks. We come through toddlerhood and into childhood. And as teenagers, we're still learning. We're getting our license. We're getting our first job, writing resumes, and when we turn 21, doesn't mean the learning stops. Right? But a lot of people that I come in contact with kind of think, well, yeah, I'm done now. Well, I've got news for you, because life is about learning. And if we don't actively pursue that growth and development, then life will give it to you. Let me tell you, I've been there and I've experienced it. Right. So actively seeking these ways to improve is a lot easier and a lot more fun than having life throw you the curveballs you need to create that growth and change. And so then looking at different levels of mastery as well. I've been in with some groups and delivered some training, and I get, oh yeah, we've done this before. And I'm thinking, interesting. So then I do some inquiry and some curious questioning about where they're at and how they interact with their team and what level of results they're getting. And they're not enacting anything they've learned. So they're sitting at that level 3 space in mastery, which is just, yeah, I know it. But if we really want to show up and really reach our potential of leadership that's within us, then that's about going and taking that next step and really starting to understand what we've been told, and then starting to implement and do it, at the next step. And then if you want to surpass all of those steps, start teaching your team about it. Start rolling it out. The content that you get in, that you're learning about yourself and you're learning about others, use that to help grow your team members. And that will then create a space where everyone's elevating. And if I'm being honest, some of the leaders that I've respected the most and I still look up to the most now are the ones that are actually in a space where they've helped me grow, where they've given me opportunities that have challenged myself. They've helped me see different parts of myself that I could do better or differently or grow from. And so as a leader, that's what people are looking to you for. They're not looking to you to just bark directions and just get the job done and all of those sorts of things, which may be good for your supervisors or your managers. But you could do so much better if your team were wanting to jump on that train and get the tickets to the right seat, right? So workplace psychological safety isn't just a buzzword, and it isn't just something that's thrown around. It's a real tactile element that you can implement into your leadership style and into your business that can create change in so many different spaces. And when someone feels safe at work, they're happy to raise questions. They're happy to challenge the status quo. They're happy to input and give different ideas. They're also going home in a better state of mind, which means when they go home, they're then not creating conflict at home by going home in a lower state of mind. When something's annoyed you at work or you're frustrated or you can't get things done, it's not like you go home and go, hey, honey, I'm home. Let's go do something great today. right? That's not how it rolls. You usually go home, dump your bag, go and, do your ritual of whatever you do, grunt, talk, or sit there and complain, right? And that's not conducive to a healthy relationship. But if you're creating that psychologically safe space and you have a team that are going home in a really stable mental space, then they're usually going home and investing in those relationships. And if by chance another job comes up down the street that may be paying more money, their spouse is kind of going to be encouraging them to stay where they are because everything's going well for them in that space as well. It's about the whole family environment. So you're going to keep your people. Chances are you're going to attract more people too. If someone is unhappy where they are, they will be seeking somewhere where they can be happy. And news travels fast. Something I've learned from the transport industry. It might seem like a big industry, but it ain't. Right? Whatever industry you're in, everyone knows everyone. So these things come out. People talk. Right? People will learn about how great your business is in this space and choose to come and seek you out for that employment aspect. Your productivity will increase because you won't have that presenteeism. And presenteeism is people showing up but doing nothing, right? So it's not like you can mark it down as an absenteeism. It's basically sometimes you don't know. Or they show up and they're not doing anything and and then it's a headache as a leader to try and motivate them to get them going. You're also setting people up for that psychological success. Because when people move down into that spectrum where they're on the lower end of the mental health space because of job demands, because of job clarity not being there, all of those hazards impacting, then they're not making great decisions. And they're probably making more mistakes, or they're not as productive. So that's creating more headaches for the leader. So I've had some leaders that have mentioned and said, I'm just so busy. I don't know if I really have time to implement some of this stuff. But I'm telling you now that the time that's taken to try and fix the problems that are coming from not implementing this stuff will take you heaps longer than just allocating some time on that strategy in that strategic place to build and grow yourself and the team around you. So, bit of a summary for me on why I feel workplace psychological safety is important. I have mentioned a couple of times my leadership program, the Ripple Effect. I can deliver that in the workplace, which I've done with quite a few companies. And the clients that I'm seeking in that space are the ones that are open-minded and curious and really want to create some change. And you can have a couple of hard eggs in there as well, because I don't mind them. I don't mind having a crack at them and trying to get them into a reframed space. But as an individual, if your company isn't in a position where they want to bring this in-house, you can join up to the online program, and you can even see your employer and try and pitch it to them on how it'll improve your leadership within the company. So if you want more information, feel free to reach out, or you can get some information on the website. But if that's not for you, if that doesn't connect for you, find something that does. I really encourage everyone to do at least one thing, major thing a year, and little things every month if they can, to keep improving their leadership. Like I said, this is an ongoing process. You're going to fall over. You're going to scrape your knee. You're going to do something and go, oh, that goes against everything that I've been taught. But you pick yourself up, dust yourself off, recognize you're a human, and you give it a go again. And I guarantee the next time you'll be better. And the next time you'll be better. And the next time after that, you'll be even better. That's what leadership's all about, right? Showing up tomorrow better than we show up today. So I hope you enjoyed the information, and I hope you enjoyed the podcast. And I look forward to serving you again in our next episode. Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here. And if you'd like to go and like and subscribe, and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.